Okay, so here were the questions you were presented. Let's see what we've got. Now, most of you seem to have gotten this. Some of you, not so much. If at this point you haven't memorized the formulas yet, basically, or the syntax for making this stuff, the next time I write it up on the board, you better write it down and study it, because this will be the third or fourth time that we've gone over it. So you've got to have it learned. For 5 integer variables and assigning them to any number, that's as simple as an access modifier, a type of int because it's an integer, naming it something, and assigning it to whatever number I feel like, and just repeating the process 5 times. Oops. So that would be an example of how this looks. So that's something that we should be familiar with by now. Strings were a little bit confusing, but I think overall you guys get the idea. It's similar, so we have our access modifier, and then our type is string, and then we just name them whatever we want. I'm just going to do one example. That's how we do strings. So we've got everything on the declaration side is exactly what you'd expect. The only thing you'd have to learn there is that you have to put text in quotation marks for it to be treated as a string. And then lastly here, the Booleans. Access modifier, type, and then assignment. That's it. So that should have been what you've got for the variable part. As far as method goes, we have a public, and this is an empty method that is named after you. So public void your name, and then the brackets, that's it. Then, this method takes a string parameter and prints the string. Now, the main confusion here is between return type and parameters. So for those of you who are playing games, maybe don't do that. So it's not public string, because that would mean that we're returning a string, and we're not. Turning off a game and then proceeding to not pay attention for other reasons is just as bad. I will stop correcting, over time, I'll stop correcting certain errors. I'll just say that you did it wrong and expect you to fix it. So the return type would be string if we did that. But because my instructions say that we're not returning anything, it's a void. And you could name it whatever. Now, parameters go inside of these parentheses. So a string parameter means I basically need to declare a local variable inside this. So there's no access modifier. I said that it's a string parameter, so the type is string, and the name can be whatever. So I'm just going to put that. As for printing it out, that's system.out.println. And then we pass it the string that gets passed in. So the value that gets passed for this parameter will be printed out. the final method did actually return something. It's a public double for the return type. Then we name it, and then we've got no parameters. It just returns the value 1.5. And that's what those methods should have looked like. We'll still have more practice with this stuff in future, but you really should start getting it by now. Now go ahead and delete all that so that you're returned to this. You should have all that except for this I can get rid of. So this is what your code should look like at the moment. Yeah, pretty much. If you have any errors, check your brackets. Make sure that you should have one set for the beginning and end of the class, and then one set each for the methods that are already there. Now, let's do some more reference type variables. So, for a reference variable type, it could be string or any other class that exists. And we had already imported a glabel before and made one and put it on the screen. So that's pretty much what we're going to do here. And I'll show you how to do the first one. So, actually, let's work through this together. If I want to make a new glabel variable, what would I need to write first? It's a variable, so the formula doesn't change from anything else. Public. What's the type? Glabel. If I want to make a glabel variable, the type is glabel. I'm going to name this one example. I'm not going to assign to it yet. I could, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to go inside init. And then I'm going to say that example is equal to, but what can I assign it to? What could I actually assign this to? What kind of values would be acceptable? What would be an acceptable value for this, do you think? No ideas? Okay. So here's the thing with reference variables. When it's a string, you can just set it equal to quotation marks and some text. But if it's a class, like a hello world or glabel, or later on we're going to have a grectangle, gpolygon, goval, and all these other things that we can do. We do what's called instantiation, which actually that word should sound familiar to you. We're going to make an instance of the glabel class. So we are going to, so what we've done is we declared a variable, and remember that declaration reserves a space in the memory of the computer. Then assignment puts something in that space. So we are going to assign an instance of the glabel class to the space that we have named example. To do that, we just say that we want a new glabel, which would make a new instance of glabel. There is a problem here, however, and you'll see this red line, because the glabel class, much like a method, has parameters for the class itself, where every time I make one, I have to pass in some information as an argument. And the type of argument required is a string, because glabel's job is to display text on the screen. So in order to get it to display that text, I would just put quotation marks and then like hello. And it automatically writes in that S and the colon, so don't add it yourself. You'll get an error if you do. Now this right here alone will not get the word hello to appear on our screen, as some of you have noticed, because all this does is create an object that holds on to the information hello, but we have not issued a command yet to add hello to the screen. To do that, I need to say add, and then the name of the object I want to add, which is what? Neither. What do we name this object? No. Example. We named this, we have a glabel, which is the type of object, and we named that object example. So we want to add example. Now if we do that, it will add it to the screen, but if you hit run, you'll notice you can't really see it. You might be able to see just the very bottom of it, and that's because it's going to add it by default at 0, 0. And the screen is actually treated very much like a graph, except the graph is like this. It's only a single quadrant. So this is 0, 0, top left corner. And the way this works is like any graph in math class, where this is the x-axis and this is the y. The only trick to remember for when we're doing this stuff with ACM is that the bigger the y, or that this is positive y is down. If you do negative, you're going up. So the bigger your y value, the further down the screen. The bigger the x value, the further to the right. So that's what you have to keep in mind, is that it's kind of like a flipped graph. So if I want this to appear roughly on the center of the screen, or at least somewhere I can see it, I need to modify this a little bit. I don't want to just add example. I want to add example at like 25, 25. Now that's not going to be the center of the screen. Should be like here, kind of. But 25 in the X and 25 in the Y. Now if you run it, you should see the word hello appear on screen. Does anyone not have that working? What's that?
I said hello.
Hello.
I don't have this class.
Yeah, it's like, don't recognize this kid. Yes. You gotta pay super close attention to your brackets. So Now that this is drawn up on the screen, let me show you how you change the color and the font. To change the color, what object do I want to change the color of? Example. How do you think I access the color data, for example? Dot. The member access operator. Example dot. Now there's a lot of methods in here that you can see, but the one that we want to call is called set color. And then we have to pass it a color, but in order to do that, we need to go up to our imports and add another one. We want to import java.awt.color with a capital C. That imports a color library that we can use. Capital C. There is an option with a lowercase c, but it is not correct, so make sure it's a capital C. Now that we have imported this color library, in order to set a color, we go down here into the parentheses, which is where we're allowed to pass our arguments. And let's do like color.red. If I run this now, the text that will appear on the screen will be written in red. Yes?
Does that have to be all caps or can it be?
There is a lowercase red. I'm not going to explain the difference right now, but they will both work equally well. Color.red. The lowercase version works just the same. I won't explain the difference right now, but there's your results. Red on screen.
It just has to be spelled right.
Oh.
Okay. And then add 1, 4, 3.
All right. Next up. If we want to change the font, it's a little bit trickier. More tricky. Whatever. I created something that we can use. I gotta see if I can remember the import for it. I actually have it written down over here on a different one, so let me see really quick. There it is. We want this. So, although maybe I forgot to add mine to the project. You should have it. Yeah, I forgot to add it for mine, but you guys should have it. I'll add mine really quick while you find it. Okay. There. So this import right here, you'll need. And what this is code that I wrote actually. And it's a simple little program where it will print out all of the fonts that are installed on your computer. Which is, of course, fairly useful. So get that written down. import com.fontfinder.common.fontfinder with capital Fs. And to get the complete list of fonts out of your system, I tried to make this very easy to use. So all you have to do is you could go in like init and you just write font finder dot print fonts like that once you have it imported. And then if you run your program again, the console will spit out every font that's installed on your system. There's a lot. Not all of the fonts can be used. Some of them won't work with the ACM stuff. But some of the more basic ones will. So there's a complete list of fonts that you can experiment with. Now let me show you how you change the font. Sorry, I might be moving too fast. If you're trying to print the fonts, you just need this line right here after you have the import. So to change the font, I'm going to go up here where I set the color. Now I have to do this before I add it to the screen, by the way. Otherwise I would have to add it again. But I'm going to say example dot set font, and there's a couple options here. It basically takes a string, and out of that string it'll find the correct one. So I could put something simple. I don't know if it will correctly do Comic Sans, but let's try it. Actually, let me run my program here. It might not recognize Comic Sans.
U Gothic.
U Gothic.
Yeah, why U space on it?
We'll try that one. That didn't do anything. Like I said, not all of these fonts will work. It usually needs to be one of the simpler ones.
It's Comic Sans MS.
Is it Comic Sans MS?
Yeah, Comic space Sans space. So how it's spelled in Comic?
That might make a difference. Oh yeah, there it is. It's in Comic Sans. You can't really see it. You have to get the name exactly right. That's why the font finder is useful. It's probably hard to see up on the screen, but it is in Comic Sans now. Let's make it not so small. So to do that, after we put the name, we put dash, and then we could put like 40. And now it's 40-point font. Comic Sans. Now that the size is 40, it's a little bit off the screen, so I might need to adjust where I'm adding it. But now it's printing that. And then lastly, if I put another dash, I can also put like bold. And it'll be in bold now. Or italic. Whoop. And now it's italic. Or underline.
If you want to do like,
Oh, sorry, it's probably underlined.
if you want to do like underline,
You know, I've actually never tried that, although underlined isn't working. Is it just underline or under? I can't remember what the command is to have it be underlined. Well, let me try bold italic. Doesn't work? I forget what the list of commands are. Okay, now it's bold italic. So you just put them in one thing like that. What is the command for underline? Oh well, you get the idea. I'll have to see if I can figure out what the one for underline is. So your assignment then is to make 3 more G labels, give them some text to display, add them to the screen in separate spots, change their color and change their fonts. That is your assignment. Remember that you have to do the color and font before you add it, because once it's been added, it's static and has to be changed separately. So mess around with this for a bit. I don't think that was the end of class. I think that was the beginning of another lunch. Yeah, we have another like 30 minutes. So take the rest of class and mess with this. I'm going to see if I can figure out the underline thing, but first I have to stop recording.